Hello crafters, welcome back to the Code Crafters. In today's video, we're diving into some basic C++ do-while loop programs. Whether you're a beginner or just brushing up on your coding skills, these examples will help you understand the fundamentals of loops in C++. Let's get started. Print numbers from 1 to 10. Hash include iostream. This line includes the iostream header file, which allows the program to use input and output functionalities. Specifically, it enables the use of cout for printing output to the console. Using namespace std. This line tells the compiler to use the std, standard, namespace. In C++, many standard library functions and objects like cout, cin, and others belong to the std namespace. Int main. This is the entry point of the program. The program begins execution at the main function. Int signifies that the function returns an integer value, typically used to signal success or failure. However, this particular program does not return anything other than 0, which represents a successful execution. Int I equals 1. Here, a variable I of type int, integer, is declared and initialized to 1. This variable will serve as the counter for the loop and will control how many times the loop runs. Do block, the block inside the do statement contains the code to be executed in each iteration. Cout I, prints the current value of I followed by a space. I++ increments the value of I by 1. Condition, while I is less than or equal to 10, after executing the block of code inside the do statement, the program evaluates the condition I is less than or equal to 10. If the condition is true, the loop runs again. If the condition is false, the loop terminates, and the program continues with the code after the loop. Initially, I equals 1. The do block executes, printing 1, and then increments I to 2. On the second iteration, I equals 2. The do block executes again, printing 2, and increments I to 3. This continues until I reaches 10. The loop prints 10 and increments I to 11. When I equals 11, the condition I is less than or equal to 10 becomes false, and the loop exits. Cout I. Inside the loop, this statement prints the current value of I followed by a space. The cout is used for output to the console. I is the value of the loop counter, which starts at 1 and will increase with each iteration. This will print the numbers from 1 to 10 on the same line, each followed by a space. I++. This is the increment operation. I++ increases the value of I by 1 after each loop iteration. After the first iteration, I becomes 2. After the second iteration, I becomes 3, and so on. Loop continuation and exit. The while condition is checked after each iteration. As long as I is less than or equal to 10, the loop continues to execute. Once I reaches 11, the condition I is less than or equal to 10 becomes false, 11 is less than or equal to 10 is false, and the loop exits. Return 0. After the loop finishes executing, the return 0 statement is executed. Return 0 indicates that the program has executed successfully and is ending without errors. In C++, returning 0 from the main function typically signifies a successful execution. After successful execution, the output will be like this. Sum of first n natural numbers. Hash include iostream. This line includes the input-output stream library in C++, which provides functionality for input and output operations. This allows us to use cin for input and cout for output. Using namespace std. This line tells the compiler to use the std, standard, namespace. In C++, many standard library functions and objects like cout, cin, and others belong to the std namespace. Int main. This is the entry point of the program. The program begins execution at the main function. Int signifies that the function returns an integer value, typically used to signal success or failure. However, this particular program does not return anything other than 0, which represents a successful execution. Variable declarations. Int number declares an integer variable number that will hold the user input, the number up to which the sum is calculated. Int sum equals 0 declares an integer variable sum and initializes it to 0. This variable will hold the running total of the sum of numbers. Int I equals 1 declares an integer variable I and initializes it to 1. This variable will be used as the loop counter to iterate through the numbers from 1 to number. Cout enter a number. This outputs the prompt enter a number to the user. It's asking the user to input a value. In number. This reads the input provided by the user and stores it in the variable number. This will be the upper limit of the sum that we want to calculate. The do-while loop is chosen because it guarantees that the loop body is executed at least once, even if the user enters 1 as the input. First iteration. I equals 1 initially. The statement sum plus equals I adds I, 1, to sum. After this, sum becomes 1. The counter I is incremented to 2. Subsequent iterations. The loop checks the condition I is less than or equal to number. If it is true, the block executes again, adding the current value of I to sum and incrementing I. This process continues until I exceeds number. Termination. When I becomes greater than number, the condition I is less than or equal to number evaluates to false, and the loop terminates. After the first iteration, I will be incremented, and the next iteration will add 2 to sum, making the sum equal to 3, and so on. I++. This line increments the value of I by 1 at the end of each iteration. It makes the program go to the next integer in the sequence, from 1 to n. Example for number equals 5. First iteration, I equals 1, sum plus equals 1 so sum equals 1. Second iteration, I equals 2, sum plus equals 2 so sum equals 3. Third iteration, I equals 3, sum plus equals 3 so sum equals 6. Fourth iteration, I equals 4, sum plus equals 4 so sum equals 10. Fifth iteration, I equals 5, sum plus equals 5 so sum equals 15, and so on. After the 10th iteration, I equals 11, and the condition I is less than or equal to 10 becomes false, so the loop terminates. Cout sum of first number numbers is sum and L. This line prints the result to the screen. It outputs a message in the format sum of first, followed by the value of number. Numbers is, followed by the final value of sum, which holds the sum of numbers from 1 to number. And L adds a new line after printing the result. After successful execution, the output for number equals 10 will be like this. Print multiplication table. Int number, this variable will store the number for which the multiplication table will be printed. It will be entered by the user. Int I equals 1, this is a counter variable, initialized to 1, that will be used to control the iteration of the loop. It starts at 1 because multiplication tables typically start from 1. Cout enter a number for the multiplication table. This outputs a prompt asking the user to input a number. In number, this takes the input from the user and stores it in the number variable. The user will enter a number, and this number will be used to calculate and display the multiplication table. Condition, while I is less than or equal to 10, this loop will continue executing as long as I is less than or equal to 10. The loop will run exactly 10 times. Initially, I is 1. After each iteration, I will be incremented by 1, using I++, and the loop will stop when I exceeds 10. Loop body. Inside the loop, the program performs the following. Cout number xi equals number asterisk I and L. This prints the current multiplication statement to the screen, in the format number xi equals result, where number is the number entered by the user, I is the current iteration, from 1 to 10, and number asterisk I is the product of number and I. The end L at the end ensures that each result is printed on a new line. Increment I. I++ increments the value of I by 1 after each iteration of the loop. The loop starts with I equals 1 and prints number x1 equals result. This continues until I becomes 11, at which point the condition I is less than or equal to 10 is no longer true, and the loop exits. After successful execution, the output will be like this. Print Fibonacci series. Variable initialization. N, a variable to store the number of terms in the Fibonacci series that the user wants to generate. T1 equals 0, initializes the first term of the Fibonacci series. T2 equals 1, initializes the second term of the Fibonacci series. Next term, a variable to hold the sum of T1 and T2, which is the next term in the series. I equals 1, initializes the counter variable I to 1, which will keep track of how many terms have been printed so far. Cout enter the number of terms. This line prints a message to the user, asking them to input how many Fibonacci terms they want. In n, this line stores the user's input in the variable n. The loop body in do part is executed first, then the condition in while part is checked whether I is less than or equal to n. This condition ensures the loop runs for n iterations. The loop will continue to execute until I exceeds n. Cout T1. This line prints the current value of T1, which is the first term in the Fibonacci sequence. After printing, a space is added for better formatting, so each number is separated by a space on the same line. Next term equals T1 plus T2. This line calculates the next term in the Fibonacci series by adding T1 and T2. The sum is stored in next term. Now, the variables T1 and T2 are updated for the next iteration. T1 is updated to the value of T2, the second term of the Fibonacci series. T2 is updated to next term, the sum of the previous two terms, which becomes the next term in the series. After printing and updating the Fibonacci terms, the counter I is incremented by 1. This keeps track of how many terms have been printed, and the loop will terminate once I exceeds n. Initially, T1 equals 0 and T2 equals 1. The first term, T1, is printed. The next term is calculated as T1 plus T2, which gives the next term in the Fibonacci sequence. The values of T1 and T2 are updated, and the next term is printed. The process repeats for n terms, updating T1, T2, and next term in each iteration. First, it prints T1 equals 0, the first term. Next, it prints T1 equals 1, the second term. Then it prints the subsequent terms by adding the previous two numbers together. Next term equals 0 plus 1 equals 1, T1 becomes 1, and T2 becomes 1. The next term is next term equals 1 plus 1 equals 2, and so on. After successful execution, output will be like this. Print hello world 5 times. The variable I is declared as an integer, int, and initialized with the value 1. This will be used as the loop counter. Inside the loop body, the statement cout. It prints the text hello world to the console, followed by end L, which inserts a new line after each print statement. This ensures that hello world appears on a new line for every iteration. The statement I++ increments the value of I by 1. This is crucial because, without this increment, the loop would run infinitely, creating an infinite loop, as I would always remain 1. After the first iteration, I becomes 2. In the next iteration, the condition I is less than or equal to 5 will still be true because 2 is less than or equal to 5, and the loop continues. While I is less than or equal to 5. In this case, the condition is I is less than or equal to 5, meaning the loop will continue executing as long as I is less than or equal to 5 is true. The loop will continue to execute the body of the loop, printing hello world, and incrementing I until I becomes 6. After successful execution, output will look like this. Print even numbers from 1 to 20. Int I equals 2. Here, we declare an integer variable I and initialize it to 2. This is the starting value for our loop. The program will begin printing even numbers starting from 2. Cout I. This line prints the current value of I followed by a space. Initially, I is 2, so it prints 2 and a space. After each iteration, the value of I increases by 2, as explained below, and the loop prints the updated value of I. I plus equals 2. This statement increments the value of I by 2. This is essential because we want to print only even numbers. So, after each iteration, I will increase by 2. Initially, I is 2, after the first iteration I becomes 4. In the second iteration, it prints 4, and I becomes 6, and so on. This continues until I becomes 22, at which point the condition I is less than or equal to 20 fails, and the loop stops. While I is less than or equal to 20. This is the condition for the do-while loop. The loop will continue running as long as the value of I is less than or equal to 20. The key point to note is that this condition is checked after each iteration. If the condition evaluates to true, the body of the loop will execute. If it's false, the loop will stop. After successful execution, the output will look like this. Print square of numbers from 1 to 10. Int I equals 1. The variable I is initialized with the value 1. This variable I will serve as the counter that starts from 1 and will be used to calculate the square of each number from 1 to 10. In the first iteration, I starts at 1, with I equals 2 in the second iteration, and so on. The loop continues executing until I exceeds 10, when I equals 11, at which point the condition becomes false and the loop terminates. Cout is used to output text to the console. This line prints the square of the current value of I. Square of is a string literal that will be printed as is. I is the current value of the counter, which will change with each iteration of the loop. I** computes the square of I. End L prints a new line after each output to ensure that each square appears on a new line. For example, when I equals 1, the output will be square of 1 is 1. The I++ statement increments the value of I by 1 after each iteration of the loop. After successful execution, the output will be like this. Print the characters of your name. String name. This declares a variable name of type string. The string type is used to store sequences of characters. Initially, it's an empty string. Cout is used to output text to the screen. Here, it prompts the user to enter your name. Cin reads user input from the console. The value entered by the user is stored in the name variable. Int I equals 0. This declares an integer variable I and initializes it to 0. The variable I will serve as the index to access each character in the string name. Condition, I is less than name.length. The loop continues as long as I is less than name.length. Name.length returns the number of characters in the string name. For example, if name is Alice, name.length will return 5, since Alice has 5 characters. Loop body. Cout name at index I and L. This prints the character at index I in the string name. The index I starts at 0, so name at index 0 will give the first character. I++. After each iteration, I is incremented by 1. This ensures the next character is accessed in the following iteration. Example. If the user entered numid, the program will print. First iteration, name at index 0, character n. Second iteration, name at index 1, character u. Third iteration, name at index 2, character m. Fourth iteration, name at index 3, character m. Fifth iteration, name at index 4, character a. Fifth iteration, name at index 5, character d. After successful execution, output will look like this. Thank you and happy coding.